Hey there. I'm excited to announce this to you today. This is what you've been waiting for in your spiritual quest. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I'm finally ready to announce it that it's ready to go. It's the Grief to Growth Community Circle. Now, this is a sanctuary where like-minded souls are united in their journey through grief and towards personal transformation. It's more than just a place. It's a beginning. It's a commitment to growth and understanding. Here you're finding not just a community, but you're entering a circle of trust and depth. You're going to engage with interactive coursework. You'll dive into exclusive podcast episodes and partake in discussions that illuminate the path from mourning to empowerment. This is a realm where every question is honored and every individual's journey is validated. To be part of this exclusive circle, visit us at grieftogrowth.com/community or look for the chat icon at the bottom of every page on the main website. Remember that entry is a privilege because I want to ensure that every member is as dedicated and genuine as you are. You must apply to join, but the journey within is worth every step. So go ahead and join us today. Check it out, grieftogrowth.com/community, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Hi there. Before we start, Brian would like to share a couple of things with you. First, did you know that Brian is a life coach, a grief guide, and a mental fitness trainer? Brian would love to help you with whatever life issues are challenging you. Brian has years of experience as well as training. You can contact Brian at www.grieftogrowth.com to learn more. Brian is the author of the best-selling book, Grief to Growth, Planted, Not Buried, which you can get on Amazon or Brian's website. This is a great book if you're in grief or to give to someone you know who is dealing with grief. Lastly, Brian creates free and paid resources for your growth. Go to www.grieftogrowth.com/gifts, www.grief2growth.com to sign up for his newsletter. Choose a gift just for signing up and keep up with what Brian is offering. And now, here's today's episode. Please enjoy.
Hey, everybody. I'm back with, this is Brian, back with another episode of Grief to Growth. And today I've got with me Dr. Rajiv Parti. He had a very interesting near-death experience I think you're going to be really interested to hear about. It brought him on a journey through the afterworld, leading to a spiritual awakening that transformed his career, his lifestyle, and even his fundamental beliefs. Before his NDE, he was a wealthy man of science with a successful career as the chief of anesthesiology at the Bakersfield Heart Hospital in California. He demanded the same success from his son as he did from himself, and they had some issues because of that. All in all, he was the last man to believe in heaven or hell until he saw heaven and hell with his own eyes. When he had his NDE on the operating table, he first watched his operation from the ceiling, and I'm going to let him tell you his story himself instead of reading that to you from his bio. But the thing about it, he has a remarkable spiritual transformation after he had his experience, and we're going to talk about that as well. So with that, I want to welcome Dr. Rajiv Parti.
It's my pleasure to be here.
I'm really looking forward to having this interview with you today, and I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. I know there's some sensitive things about it, but if you could tell me about your experience, what happened to you?
You know, in 2008, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And one of the options was radical prostatectomy to take the whole prostate out. I opted for that. So that cured me of prostate cancer, but it left me with complications like impotency and incontinence. So in 2010, after about approximately 2 years, I was not getting better. So at UCLA, they implanted an artificial sphincter for me to be able to control my bladder function. That got infected about on Christmas. By Christmas Eve, I got very sick. And that's when my wife rushed me to UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles Hospital. And they did an emergency surgery because I was septic. And the main thing is, if you're septic and there's an infection and there's a foreign body, it becomes a source of infection. The sooner you take out, the better it is. And that's when I had the experience.
Okay. Well, tell me about your experience.
Okay, so they rushed me to the surgery. And then I had looked at the clock when I had gone in. So approximately 15-20 minutes later, I was surprised to see myself floating near the ceiling. And I could hear and I could see what the surgeons were doing. So much so, anesthesiologist told a joke. I can't repeat it, but I still remember it.
Hmm.
You know, and I'm an anesthesiologist, and part of our job is to keep the atmosphere light in the operating room.
Okay.
So from there, my consciousness went to different realms. I would like to say it went to heaven, like most of the people say, but it went to a hellish realm where I could see the souls wailing and crying and were in misery. And my first question was, why am I here? And the realization was given to me that I had not been a good man. I was very good technically as a physician, but I had no connection with my patients. And for me, money was everything. Expensive cars. I lived in a 10,000 square foot house on a golf course and a lake. I used to drive a Hummer, the extreme SUV. It gave only 8 miles a gallon. And I'm a Hindu by birth, but I was not practicing any religion. We just went for functions, religious holidays to party, basically, excuse to party. And that got transformed by a near death experience. So when I was in the hellish realm, I cried for help, and my father showed up. I had a very difficult relationship with my father. In today's age, I would say my father had PTSD because he was product of trauma when the India and Pakistan separated as two countries. There was mass murder on both sides, and my family was stuck on the Pakistan side. So he had to lie among dead bodies to escape being murdered by the Muslim mob, and he came to India. And the Hindus did the same thing to Muslims on the other side. So it was both sides. And so his education was cut short. He could not become what he wanted to become in life. So he was living his life through me, and he wanted me to succeed. But there are different ways of motivating a child than beating him up every time. But here, he asked for forgiveness, and I realized he actually loved me. And I forgave him. And then I touched his feet. Like in India, you always touch the feet of elders. And he blessed me, and he reminded me of the words he had said on his deathbed. He died now 25 years ago in Fresno, California, after complication from heart surgery. And he told me in Hindi, Indian language, "Beta apne niyat saaf rakhna, Bhagwan barakat dalega," which literally translates, if you keep your conscience clear, God will bless you. So I had forgotten about that. He reminded me. And then he led me towards a tunnel. And in the tunnel, I had a review of my present life. What was most amazing was I had a review of my past lives. And in the past life, in this life, I used to have pain in my wrist because I had torn my cartilage. And I had 2 surgeries on wrist. And it was chronically painful. So much so at times I was not able to work. So in that life, I saw myself whipping the farmers, and my soldiers were doing the same thing. And I asked for forgiveness from the farmers, and they forgave me. And in this life, when I woke up, my pain was gone. I was able to work without any pain.
Wow.
So I had a review of my present life too. It was basically it was like I was made to feel what the other person was feeling. Good and bad. I did some good things too.
Yeah.
So what the other person was feeling. And from the tunnel, on the other sides, I was greeted by 2 angels. I knew there were angels, but I did not know who were they, their names or anything. Then they telepathically told me that one was Michael with a bluish hue and one was Raphael. And that made sense to me later on when I read Raphael is the angel for healing, for people who are sick, and for doctors. And Michael is the chief of, for strength, is a chief of angels. Hmm. And they guided me above a meadow towards a light. A stream was flowing, and I could distantly hear the sound Om. And when I was in the presence of light, it was like 1,000 suns, but it was not hurting the eyes. And then I was given the realization that it's not my time yet, but my life will change dramatically. I have to quit anesthesia and become a spiritual man and help people wake up. And that's what my transformation started. And then I woke up in the recovery room with a jolt. I told the nurses about my story. They believed it because they had heard similar stories from before. But when I told the doctors, oh, you must be dreaming or something, maybe hallucinating. I told that to my family. My wife believed, my daughter believed, my sons were agnostic about it. It didn't matter to them. So, but when my life started changing, then my wife for sure believed it, that something happened. Yeah. Then after I woke up, I sold my Hummer, I sold my house, and I moved to a smaller house, decent house, a moderate house. It doesn't have to be for two people to live in a 10,000 square foot house. And my life literally and figuratively went from Hummer to hybrid. And then I resigned from my job as anesthesiologist, and I've been a spiritual seeker since then. And I have learned meditation practice. I'm a teacher from Chopra University, Deepak Chopra, for meditation. I learned yoga there, and I learned Ayurveda, and I learned even other disciplines like EFT. And that was my immediate transformation, but there's other things which happened later. I can tell you about that as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my book is only up to my life up to 2012, 2-3 years after my near-death experience. But a lot of things happened after that.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to do that. Let's go over some questions about your experience itself. So I'm curious as being an anesthesiologist, being in the medical profession, I'm assuming you had heard of NDEs. What were your thoughts about NDEs before this?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey there, something I want to tell you about today. My podcast platform, Buzzsprout, has recently made it easier for me to allow you to support me financially. Go to www.grieftogrowth.com/subscribe. That's grief2growth.com/subscribe. And once you're there, you can sign up to support me financially. Now, you can do it for as little as $3 a month, or of course, as much as you'd like. If you do that, you'll get access to bonus episodes, and you'll see those in the regular feed. They'll have a lock on them. But when you become a subscriber, you'll actually get access to your own private feed, and you'll be able to listen to the regular podcast along with the bonus podcast for the subscribers. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for sharing the podcast. And I want to thank those of you who support me financially. Have a great day, and on to the episode.
I used to think people have hallucinations, and as I was with religion, my Hindu religion, I didn't care. It didn't make me a difference. Mm-hmm. Whether they're true, whether they're not true, I never gave it a thought.
Yeah. And so you said you were raised Hindu, but you were kind of nominally Hindu. You weren't really practicing. I'm curious about what is Hindu teaching about? Are there hellish realms, or is there a hell in Hinduism?
There is a hell in Hinduism, Patal Lok. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And why do you think you experienced that? As you mentioned earlier, most of the time we hear about NDEs, we hear positive experiences, but we do
Yeah.
know there's a certain percentage that are what we call less than positive.
They say pain is 100 times more transformative than pleasure. And maybe I needed a lot of transformation in my life,
Mm.
to transform.
Yeah,
But otherwise, I can't give a reason. People ask me, why did you have an NDE and somebody else doesn't have an NDE? There's no reason I can give. I can relate the fact.
sure. I just wonder what your thought might be on that, because it is an experience that people have, but it seems to be relatively rare. One thing I want to bring this up because I post NDE experiences on my website, and a lot of times people ask me, "What about hell?" And it was interesting. I was listening to a guy who had an NDE just a couple of days ago, and he said he experienced hell, and he claimed hell was eternal, a place of infinite punishment, eternal punishment. But yet he didn't stay in hell eternally. He was taken out similarly to you were. What are your thoughts now after you've had this experience about an eternal hell?
You know what? I believe if you own up to your mistakes and you are forgiven, or you forgive yourself for your mistakes and you ask for help from God or your ancestors, you can get out of hell.
Yeah, that seems to be your experience. And as I said, I've heard a couple of people who have had these experiences, and they'll insist that hell is internal, yet they're also always removed from hell themselves. This guy
Yeah.
said he was taken down and he almost touched the lake of fire, and then he was rescued, and that seems to be a fairly universal experience.
That's what I'm saying. I was rescued by my father.
Yes. And you said your father and you had a strained relationship. So were you surprised that your father was the one that rescued you?
I was very surprised. He looked much younger, and so that was the first realization I had. He loved me after all.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, I thought he didn't love me. I got my share of beating if he had a bad day in the office, and I did even a small mistake, I used to get beating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you had mentioned in your bio that your relationship with your son, I think at the time was kind of strained. Do you think that was a result of the relationship you had with your father?
Exactly, because I was becoming my father,
Mm-hmm.
because he was not good in studies, and I wanted him to become a doctor, not considering what he wants to do.
Yeah.
So after my NDE, he flunked his medical school, but I was calm. And I said, if you don't want to be a doctor, you can leave. So he left medical school and then went into computers. And now he's in San Francisco and very happy.
Yeah.
He is not probably making as much as he could have made as a doctor. But the main thing now I realize it is the happiness and joy you get from your work.
Mm-hmm. And you said before your NDE, you were pursuing material things. You had the house, you had the car. Did you feel like that stuff brought you happiness?
It didn't. It was always more. To be honest with you, I had initially done pediatrics residency, but pediatricians are the lowest paying specialty in America.
Yeah.
So I said, let me go to a specialty which makes the maximum money, very good money. So I did second residency. Residencies are not easy
Mm.
in anesthesia, so I could literally double my income.
So good. Yeah. I think a lot of us think that making more money, having more stuff will make us happy, which is an interesting illusion, because when we talk to people that have the level that we think we would be happy at, they're not happy.
Yeah. So, like, I think in the basic, I have read also, they have done a lot of studies. If the basic needs are met, food, shelter, in a car which takes you from one place to another, then the amount of money doesn't make you happy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's my experience. It's the relationships which make you happy.
Yeah. And there have been studies that have actually backed that up. There's that happiness, once you reach a certain level of income, and it changes, of course, but once you reach a certain level of income, the happiness scale does not go up as you make more money.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you still need your basic needs met.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So you said a lot of times when people have near-death experiences, they're very reluctant to share them with other people. And I think especially a doctor, because doctors are trained to be very material. You could disagree with that if you like, but so you actually shared with the nurses pretty much right away that you'd had this experience?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I shared with my colleagues too. They thought that I'm resigning. They thought I've gone crazy to give up such a lucrative job.
Mm-hmm.
I was making really good money. To give that up to follow a spiritual path, they thought I'm crazy.
So when you were in the operating room when you had this experience, is there any documentation that your heart stopped or anything like that?
In the medical record.
Okay. And you were able to tell them the joke that the anesthesiologist had told while you were out. Was there any explanation for that? Your ability to do that?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi there. I'm really excited to tell you about my latest ebook. It's 4 lessons that you can learn from the near-death experience without going through all the trouble of dying to learn them. I've been studying NDEs for several years now. I am completely convinced that not only are they 100% real, but that there's some very universal wisdom that we can get from the near-death experience. And I've distilled that down in this book into 4 short lessons. And I've also given you all the reasons why I believe that NDEs are absolutely real. So go to www.grieftogrowth.com/NDE lessons to pick it up for free. www.growth.com/NDE lessons. I hope you enjoy it.
No, it was my experience.
Mm-hmm. I'm just curious if the doctor said, well, this is because of,
As an anesthesiologist, I can tell you, hearing is the first sense which comes back.
Okay.
And he said, maybe you were light in anesthesia, but if I was light in anesthesia, why was I not in pain?
Yes.
If I was light in anesthesia, I should have pain.
Right.
But I didn't have pain.
Right. And I was listening to one of your accounts earlier. I think you said you saw some family members who were still here when you had your experience. Is that true?
No, I saw my mother in India.
In India, right, right. And what was she doing at the time?
She and my sister were discussing what to cook for dinner because it was morning time here, it was evening time there.
Mm-hmm.
Then I called my mother when I was well enough to call, and she corroborated that.
So it sounds like you never had any doubt of your experience. Did you think, okay, well, maybe I was light in anesthesia, or maybe this was a dream, or did you know immediately that this was real?
I know it was real because, as I said, the changes which happened in me and all of kind of fast. That is the proof,
Yeah. And your belief in reincarnation before this, again, I know your background is Hindi, and I know that's common in the Hindu religion, but did you give much thought to reincarnation?
Growing up in India, it is given that we are reincarnated.
Mm-hmm.
So I believed before, but I didn't pay attention. So my belief was confirmed because I saw my past life and my wrist healed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's never late to forgive somebody or ask forgiveness, even if you did it in the past, the person has died, or you you can still ask forgiveness.
I think that's a very important lesson. I've heard so many people, I deal with people in grief, and we have regrets because we said something or we didn't say something or we did something in the past. And I'll hear people say, well, it's too late to ask for forgiveness because they're gone. So how would you respond to that?
No, you can still, they still have spirit, you know. You can ask forgiveness, you can write a letter to them and just burn it and let it go through the ethers to their spirit.
Yeah. So how did your family respond to your changes when you again, I think there's a lot of evidence why near-death experiences are real. And you had a couple of what we call veridical things. You could tell the joke that the anesthesiologist told. You could tell what your mother and your sister were doing in India at the time you had your operation. But the other things about NDEs that is amazing is people literally change their lives, and people don't change their lives because of hallucinations. So how did your family respond to that?
Okay, as I said, my daughter believed, my wife believed, but my boys, they were agnostic, they didn't care. But 5, 6 years later, initially my marriage improved. I've been married for 35 years, and then my marriage started falling apart.
Sorry.
Because I was not the same man my wife married. And the divorce rate of people who had NDE is almost double from regular divorce rate. Even Dr. Eben Alexander is a classic example. He got divorced after his NDE. And so that I had to work on saving my marriage. My marriage was only one signature short of finalizing the divorce. And from there we turned around. Mutual love, mutual respect, mutual care. It was not just love, it was respect and care that we practiced, both of us, and forgiveness for each one of us. That we turned around, and my last 5 years have been the best 5 years of my 35 years of marriage.
Oh, wow. That just gave me goosebumps. That's so good to hear. When my daughter passed away, I had some people come to me and quote to me statistics about people who lose a child and the divorce rate is so high, which is actually not true, but people say that. But I know it is true for people that have near-death experiences. But it does go to show that if you work at it, you can come back from it. But these changes, and this is why I've heard some people even say, well, I'm literally not the same person I was when I before I had my experience. Like I have a different soul or something. So the spouse says, who is this person? Who's this person? This is not the person that I married.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's happened in my marriage. So I had to work on it, and then I had to. It was a lot of work. Like giving you an example. I was busy giving lectures, and I had forgotten to take care of my wife. I took her. Oh, she's a Indian woman. Where is she going to go? And I took her for granted. Giving you an example, we went to the mall and I asked her, what do you want for coffee? And she said, don't you know you've been married to me for so many years, what I like for coffee? Yeah. These small things count. And then I remembered, thank God that she loves cafe latte. Wow. I didn't know her size. But now I do small things like buy her nightstand. She likes to have a glass of water. So I make sure every night that I put water there. Nice. And there's small things. You know what this is me of Mother Teresa's quote. We all can't do big things, but we all can do little things with great love.
And is that a lesson you learned from your NDE or from your life review?
Yeah, and I learned the power of forgiveness. My wrist healing was the biggest proof, because in this life I was having pain.
Right. So that you think that was a carryover from the things you had done in the past life, and that was manifesting itself as physical discomfort in this life.
Exactly.
So I know that you said in your book you just kind of stopped in a couple of years after your near-death experience. So what has happened to you since that time?
So one thing I told you about my marriage,
Mm-hmm.
and then I had visions of Jesus Christ and angels, dreams and angels. So I was led to Christianity to follow Jesus because I had felt the presence of Jesus in my near death experience, but I had not seen him. But I had visions later on of Jesus. And I was running around doing different things and I was not finding the clear path. So I went to the local church here, Twin Peaks, and become a member of that church, and they actually baptized me in the ocean. It was, like they said, Jesus was baptized in Jordan River.
Right.
So, so they baptized me in ocean, the Pacific Ocean. It was scary because I don't know how to swim.
Mm-hmm.
It was, but it was a short dip only.
Mm-hmm.
And there were two people behind me, two people in front of me, in case I float away. So, but then traditional Christianity was not vibing with me. So then there is something known as a new thought.
Yes.
And I became passionate about new thought.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I am now with the
Okay.
unity movement.
Yes. Interesting. That's very interesting because a lot of people that have had near-death experiences give up their religion. It's just the opposite. They're like, I don't want anything to do with religion. Jesus is a big figure in near-death experiences. So even for people that aren't Christians, you said you were nominally Hindu. I interviewed a young man. He was 3 years old when he had his experience. He experienced Jesus, but he was a Jew. He was raised Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
So I do believe that there seems to be something to Jesus, but you found traditional Christianity lacking.
Yeah. See, what I like about the new thought is that God, is not a old man with a white man with a old man with a beard sitting in a throne above in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about the God is within us. And like Jesus, who walked the earth, had reached the highest potential of a humankind, and that's how he became Christ. So our goal is to increase the level of our consciousness to Christ consciousness, which we all are capable of doing.
Interesting. So the ideas of Christianity about being saved by Jesus being crucified and about eternal hell and things like that, you don't believe in.
I don't believe in.
Okay.
A new thought, especially Unity Church, does not believe in.
Yeah, I actually I don't go to church anymore, but the last church I attended was Unity, and that's the closest thing I've found to if I were going to go to church, that's where I would go because it is much more open, as you said. God is within. There's no original sin teaching. There's none of that stuff that some of the trappings that I think people put onto Jesus's teachings.
Yeah, and something they say. The religion is what Jesus taught, not about Jesus. Christianity is what Jesus taught. No, it should not be about Jesus.
Yeah,
Something like that.
Yeah, well, the thing is that the Bible that we have, and I don't want to get too far into this, but the Bible that we have it wasn't written by Jesus, and so I don't know how much he would approve or not approve of it. So what were some of the lessons that you came back with? I know you mentioned there were 7 spiritual lessons that you learned. What were some of them?
Some of them were, as I mentioned, like we have past lives, and the consciousness can live without body, and we are all connected to each other. And the true nature of God is love. And what else was it? Yeah, these.
Yeah, it sounds great. And your father, I know you said your father was a harsh man when he was here. Do you believe that we continue to grow after we cross over?
I think so. He was a changed man when I met him.
Mm-hmm.
He was a changed man. Yeah.
And what have your experiences? A lot of times when people, again, have had near-death experiences, they'll come back with various abilities, psychic abilities. Sometimes weird things will happen around them with electronics and things like that. So have you had anything like that?
Not exactly. I became more intuitive and have visions. And actually, I had a shared death experience too. If you read my book, there
Mm.
was vision and shared death experience. My best friend died with liver cancer. And then when he was dying, I went with him up to a certain level and then I turned back. That's when I saw Jesus, and that's when actually Jesus said that my name should be Michael, my religious name or spiritual name is Michael. So when I got baptized, baptism was only 2, 3 years ago.
Oh,
So then my name became Rajiv Michael Parti. That's
oh,
what my baptism certificate says.
okay, okay. So you have had other experiences. You said you've had visions and you had this shared death experience, which is something that a lot of people aren't really familiar with. I wasn't myself until just a few years ago.
Yeah. Shared death experiences like somebody near and dear to you or nurses working in a hospice experienced, your soul goes to a certain level
Mm-hmm.
towards heaven or hell or, on the journey of the other soul. But there is a fence, there is a valley, or there is a river that stops your soul, but the other soul keeps going.
Mm-hmm.
So you are told to go back.
And so what was the barrier that you saw when you crossed with your friend?
It was, I think, a wall.
Okay. Okay. Um, were you there? Were you present with him physically when he crossed, or were you at a
I
distance?
was actually, I saw him at night, and then in the morning, I woke up suddenly, and then my wife told me he just passed.
Okay. Okay.
I saw a light in my room.
Oh, okay. And have
Yeah.
you had any experiences of him since then? Has he come to you at all in any kind of way?
I see him in dreams,
Okay.
in vision and dreams, you know. And, like for me, the biggest proof is that I became and went to Christianity.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So you're a totally changed man at this point from who you were
Totally,
before you had this experience. And so, what is it you're doing today?
So Unity has a program called Licensed Unity Teacher. So
Hmm.
I'm studying to be a licensed Unity teacher, and I have given my application to be a minister school of Unity. So if I get accepted, I'll become a reverend. So then I'll be giving sermons every Sunday and be a help to my community. Like this book I'm reading is Eric Butterworth, Universe is Calling.
Yeah.
How-
Yeah. I've read
You
that.
know,
Yeah.
basically he's talking about how to pray without talking to God.
Hmm.
God, you don't always beg for things. You're not trying to p- please God with flattery.
Hmm. So what are your thoughts on God? That's a big subject. So what is God to you?
God is a universal spirit which manifests through us. And people give different names. And God, when I say God, is not the traditional God,
Hmm.
but that's the easiest way to say it.
Yeah, I know people do get hung up on the word God because it does imply Christianity. It does imply the guy sitting on the throne who's there to judge us. And I know that's not what you mean. That's why I wanted to give you an opportunity to
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
It's not, you're not judged, you are in love, you're loved.
yeah.
And there is grace which is always flowing. The way I say grace does not differentiate between a sinner or somebody who has done bad or who is good. Grace is there for everyone. And what we need to do is, like on a boat, there is a mast. So we need to hoist our mast and the wind will take you. So grace is there for everyone, but we have to make the effort to hoist the mast.
I love that. I love that analogy. So we need to accept the grace that's constantly flowing.
And one of the favorite parables for me for Bible is the parable of the sower. So the seeds are falling. They fall on rocky soil, they don't germinate, they fall on thorns, they germinate, but then they wither away. There are 4 levels.
Right.
And once they fall on which has been land, which has been prepared for it, they grow and become big trees. So
Right.
we have to prepare for the seeds, the land, for them to germinate and grow. So we have to do our part.
So what are your thoughts now? I know it sounds like you didn't think about death much before your experience, but what are your thoughts on death now when someone passes, like your friend, for example? How do you view that?
Death is, like Indian book Gita is the Bible of Hindus, says soul is which cannot be cut, cannot be burnt, and cannot be dried. So death is basically changing of clothes for the soul. The old body has worn out, so the soul leaves that body and takes birth as a new body.
Okay. So you don't see death as an end to anything other than the physical body?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, your experience is fascinating, and I thank you for sharing it. I know sometimes when people have what we call negative, I don't like the word negative, but less than pleasant near-death experiences, they feel some sort of shame about sharing them. And I think we shouldn't turn away from all experiences, because I think they're all they can all teach us something.
Yeah. That's what I'm sharing. I could have, said I went to heaven, to look good, but I need to say what things happen.
Well, it's PMH Atwater tells a story about, I think she was in a room giving a lecture and someone stood up and said they had a hellish near-death experience, and they said it was the best experience of their life. And another person said they had a heavenly near-death experience, and they said it wasn't the best experience of their life. But that it seems to be for some people kind of a turning point, kind of a wake-up call.
Yeah. It was a wake-up call for me. That's why my book name is Dying to Wake Up.
Right. So I'm in your opinion, and I know, I'm asking something you may not have an answer to, but that experience, that hellish experience, do you think that's like a self-imposed thing? It's because is it self-imposed, or do you think it's imposed from the outside?
The hellish experience is, I think, self-imposed. As I said, you have to be responsible for your actions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be my understanding. I think sometimes people, when they cross over, subconsciously maybe even feel like I'm not worthy of going to that blissful place, and that it seems to me that to be a temporary thing, as it was for you, until we realize this is not where I want to be.
Yeah, and then you have to show some repentance to make amends and ask for help. As I said, grace is there for everyone in this life and in the afterlife, and that grace can save you.
Yeah. Well, anything else you'd like to share before we end today?
No, it was a great conversation.
Yeah, I thank you very much for doing this. I think this is, again, a very, very important lesson, because when we hear these reports, right, and I don't want to ignore the negative reports or the not so pleasant reports, but we need to put them in some sort of context. And people have taken this idea. Someone says, I went to hell. And I've heard several people say this, and I can't emphasize it enough. I went to a place of eternal torment, but universally they're not there. So they were all taken out. So Howard Storm famously had a not so pleasant near-death experience.
Right.
But as soon as he asked for help, he was taken out. And every time I've heard anybody share a negative experience, they were somehow rescued from it. And I think that's a very important lesson, that there is.
I believe that, people ask me how to get out of hell. Mm-hmm. I said, own your mistakes, ask for help, and pray.
Yeah. And the other lesson I take from that is it's never too late.
It's never too late. And forgiveness is never too late. That's one of my best advice.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Parti, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Brian. It was my pleasure.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Grief to Growth. Brian hopes that you find this episode helpful and will come back for future episodes. Brian's best-selling book, Grief to Growth, Planted, Not Buried, is a great resource for anyone who is coping with grief or knows someone who is. If you enjoy the podcast and would like to support it, there are 3 things you can do to help. The first is to share the podcast with someone that you think it will help. The second is to go to iTunes, rate, and review the episode. The third way you can support the podcast is by becoming a patron. Head over to www.patreon.com/grief2growth. That's patreon.com/grief, the number 2, growth, and sign up to make a small monthly donation. Patrons get access to exclusive bonus content and knowledge that you are helping to spread the message of grief to growth. For more about Brian and Grief to Growth, visit www.grief2growth.com.
Hi there. I hope you enjoyed this latest episode of the podcast, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. What questions came up for you? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? I invite you to visit us at grieftogrowth.circle.so. That's grief, the number 2, growth.circle.so, to continue the conversation with me and with other listeners. It's a space to sound off, to share reactions, and to go deeper into the topics from the show. I look forward to chatting more, and I hope to see you there.